applicant the opportunity to address these concerns, comments, opinions, or views. Please be reminded that the Environmental Impact Assessment Report for the proposed project is available for access by the public at the following locations: the Gibraltar All-Age and Infant School, Gibraltar, St. Anne; the Madras Primary School, Madras, St. Anne; the Discovery Bay Police Station, Discovery Bay, St. Anne; Also Spring Police Station, Also Spring, Trelawney; the Albertown Post Office, Albertown, Trelawney; the Sawyers Post Office, Sawyers, Trelawney; the National Environment and Planning Agency's website, which is www.nepa.gov.jm; also the National Environment and Planning Agency's Documentation Center; and finally, Conrad Douglas and Associates website, which is www.cdaestech.com. Finally, be reminded that comments can be sent to the applicant of the agency at 10 Caledonia Avenue, Kingston 5, or via email to applications@nepa.gov.jm. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nelson. We now go to a commercial break, but we'll be right back with a continuation of this meeting. now invite you to watch a video
on
on
Noranda Jamaica Bauxite Partners 2 and their strong Jamaican partnership.
Noranda Jamaica Bauxite Partners 2 and its predecessor companies in St. Ann have literally grown up with Jamaica and have established close relationships that have shaped the comprehensive friendships and partnerships developed with all sectors of the population over the past 70 years. Bauxite mining in St. Ann commenced in 1967 by Kaiser Bauxite Company. After a number of ownership changes, in November 2016, Dada Holdings, an investment and management company based in the United States of America, purchased the company from Noranda Aluminum, with Dada choosing to retain the name Noranda. Noranda Bauxite and the Government of Jamaica constitute the partnership Noranda Jamaica Bauxite Partners 2. Noranda holds a 49% share and by agreement is the managing partner. Noranda presently mines bauxite in sections of St. Ann. The bauxite ore is shipped from Discovery Bay to our sister company, Noranda Alumina, located in Gramercy, Louisiana, for processing into alumina. Bauxite is also shipped to third parties. In the area of environmental responsibility, the company acknowledges that there is some environmental impact by the mining of bauxite, but works closely with the regulators and complies with the terms and conditions of its mining permits to reduce and mitigate against such risks. Measures include the use of best-in-class equipment and technology towards dust mitigation, protection of caves, sinkholes, important heritage resources, and preservation of flora and fauna for reuse and re-entry in the rehabilitation of mined areas. Noranda is proud of its participation in national development as a direct earner of foreign exchange, tax, and government revenue contributor, as well as participation in nation-building activities. The Noranda landscape is literally dotted with schools, colleges, playfields, greenhouses, community centers, clinics, roads, skills training centers, small businesses, youth clubs, senior citizens associations, small farmers associations, service clubs, and housing developments. Some of our projects and initiatives include the Water Valley Poultry Rearing and Processing Cooperative and the Peanut Factory in our mining area have been providing jobs and income for a number of our mining community residents and small farmers for some 30 years. The establishment of a public clinic, the Don Tretzer Clinic, named after our first general manager, serving employees and surrounding communities for over 50 years. The National Tree Planting Program. Sponsorship of the University of the West Indies chairs in hydrogeology and water resources and labor relations endowed by Kaiser, Alpart, and Jamalco. A strong partnership developed with the University of the West Indies Marine Lab in Discovery Bay, St. Ann, and with other educational institutions. Particularly proud of the UA's Award of Outstanding Contribution during their 70th anniversary celebrations in 2017. The greenhouse revolution in farming, pioneered by Noranda across mining areas. Leading the fundraising campaign to build the Kaiser Ward at the St. Ann's Bay Hospital. The early Discovery Bay public water supply, bolstered by the initial infrastructure constructed by Kaiser Bauxite and donated to the community. The National Pushcart Derby, created by Kaiser Bauxite, which inspired the Jamaica bobsled teams and the Cool Runnings movie. Well-known stewardship of the Puerto Seco Beach and Columbus Park. Sponsorship of an annual youth summer camp that accommodates 300 children each year. In the field of education, over 200 educational grants, summer jobs, and tertiary university scholarships granted each year. Noranda is also faithful to its fiduciary obligations, contributing some US 80 million annually into the economy from salaries, wages, taxes, levy, royalties, and local purchases, and providing over 400 direct employment jobs, 400 indirect jobs through contractor services, and over 2,500 indirect jobs through contractor and temporary jobs. Noranda Bauxite will always be grateful to our employees, members of the public, and our host community for their support that recognizes the importance and value of Noranda and the bauxite industry to the country. Noranda is a Jamaican partner with 100% Jamaica employment, and with a sensitivity always demonstrated by our employees to the need for full support for the preservation and protection of our historical and valued national heritage. We know that the community bottom line is good environmental stewardship, balanced with economic and social benefits. And most importantly, to the public and to ourselves, mutual respect.
Thanks, FM. It's good to have you. The findings of the Environment Impact Assessment will now be presented by Dr. Conrad Douglas, the Executive Chairman and Principal Consultant of Conrad Douglas and Associates Limited, a pioneering multidisciplinary environmental management consultancy firm in Jamaica and the English-speaking Caribbean, which has over 35 years of experience in environmental impact assessment, project planning, sustainable development, project management, engineering, and environmental management. Dr. Douglas.
Hearing over the past year or two about SML. So I must say from the very outset, what is an SML? An SML is a special mining lease which is granted to the holder by the Honorable Minister of Mining. And this enables the holder to prospect for and to develop, mine, and dispose of particular minerals which might be in the area designated for that lease. Now, in going through the presentation, I will be mentioning what is involved in this proposed project, the policies, the legislation, the regulations, and the standards that are considered, that is the regulatory framework, and a description of the environmental baseline or setting, as well as the impacts or potential impacts which we identified. We'll also mention
the impact mitigation steps which we propose that should be taken, as well as the analysis of alternatives, or other words, what else could be done. And finally, we will mention the environmental monitoring and management plan. So let me begin with the location. Where are we exactly? This SML 173 is located in parts of the parishes of Trelawney and St. Anne. And here you can see on the map, for those of us on television, exactly where it is located in Jamaica. And to the western or left-hand side, you see the cockpit country protected area, which was designated by the Most Honorable Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, on the 21st of November, 2017. And beside that, you see SML 173, and then there's SML 165 and SML 172. If you look at the top right-hand corner, you will see that in detail. The next slide shows in greater detail the designated cockpit country protected area, which the EIA, the SML 173, which is the subject of the EIA, SML 165, which is beside it, and SML 162 at the very top. The proposed cockpit country protected area, which has been designated in a presentation by the Most Honorable Prime Minister in Parliament, consists of southern Trelawney, southeast St. James, northern St. Elizabeth, and northern Manchester. Now, I must say in the description of this project that it will entail the mining of bauxite, if permitted, over a period of 25 years. And this will be based on approved 5-year mining plans, which will be developed by Noranda and submitted to the regulatory agencies. The project will provide bauxite feedstock to sustain Noranda Jamaica Partners bauxite operations for the export market. The ore bodies and haul roads in SML 173 comprises 15% or 1,250 hectares of the total area of SML 173. Noranda Jamaica Bauxite Partners 2 do not involve the processing of bauxite to alumina. And it's important that we make this distinction. They do not produce alumina in Jamaica. Instead, the bauxite is shipped overseas for processing. The rate of dry bauxite production may be as high as 6 million metric tons per year. And this has the potential to earn about 150 million United States dollars per year for Jamaica. And this is important, and it contributes enormously to our economy. Noranda Jamaica Bauxite Partners 2 operations provide some 3,300 jobs in total, with 400 of these jobs being direct, another 400 being indirect, and there are 2,500 indirect job opportunities. There will be increased opportunities for residents in the surrounding communities as the mining progresses. Now, there are about 10 steps involved in the production process at Noranda, but there are 5 main ones, and the 5 main ones begin with, firstly, settling any issues concerning mining rights with any privately owned property owner. And this includes, for example, ensuring that if there's any compensation on the value of the land, if there's any damage, there is compensation and the people are paid for their lands. This is then followed by the construction of haul roads for access to and transportation of the bauxite ore. The next step involved the stripping and storage of the first 24 inches of topsoil for use in rehabilitation activities after mining. Mining is then done, and then the mine out areas or ore bodies and haul roads are then rehabilitated. On completion of mining, of rehabilitation, the rehabilitated areas is turned over to the original owners, or they can be used for various other purposes, such as housing development, water storage, greenhouse development, health centers, educational facilities, recreational facilities, and so on. The SML 172 area comprised both private and government lands, of which 70% is titled, and there's another untitled 30%, of course, and these are privately owned lands. Those of us on television will see that some 45% that's shown in our pie chart there is privately owned, and some 55% is owned by the government of Jamaica, which Noranda manages for and behalf of the Commissioner of Mines. Beneath that, you will see that the entire operations is owned at a ratio of 51% by the government of Jamaica through Jamaica Bauxite Mining Limited, and 49% by Noranda. So in fact, ladies and gentlemen, the operations belong to you, belong to us. Noranda really manages the operations by a special agreement on behalf of the partners. Now, let me just say that if mining rights are required for any of the privately owned land, Noranda is obliged to pay fair and reasonable compensation to the owner or occupier for disturbance, as mentioned previously. And if there are any crops that they have, or buildings that may be affected or impacted, they have to pay for that as well. As previously mentioned, they return the rehabilitated lands to the original owners. In doing the environmental impact assessment, we had to analyze the regulatory framework in detail, and this consists of policies, of which there were several national and international policies, legislation, of which there were 27, and the regulations and standards associated with those. And this is showing that of the national legislation, there was 73%, and the international policies, 15%, and the local policies, there were 13%. But let me give you an idea of the international ones. For example, Agenda 21 had to be analyzed in detail, and the Vision 2030 had to be analyzed, and the policy for National System of Protected Area, which is very important in Jamaica, and for which the cockpit country protected area that is designated will form a part, had to be analyzed in detail. The NRCA Act of 1991, 1996, and the Water Resources Act and the Forestry Act also had to be analyzed in detail. As previously mentioned, there is a designated cockpit country protected area which was tabled in the Houses of Parliament by the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, our Prime Minister. Finally, in respect of regulation, bauxite mining will only commence in SML 173 upon issuance of regulatory approvals and permits. Now, sorry, it is important to know what is inside of this area, this SML 173. And so we conducted a series of scientific investigations on the biological environment, the physical environment, the social, the economic environment, and Noranda independently commissioned the Jamaican National Heritage Trust Commission to study in detail the historical and archaeological resources of the area. Let me stress that the area is sparsely populated. The area is not pristine, and it has been subject to various human activities in the past and at present. And these include, for example, establishment of plantations in the early 1700s, hunting, human settlements, agricultural practices, and land clearance. There are important geological features, so the rocks and soils and the formations in the area. And the SML area consists predominantly of the white limestone group among the karstic features of these typical high purity white limestones in Jamaica. There are rolling knolls, hillocks, and valleys, which generally characterize these karstic areas. The elevation ranges from about 200 meters above sea levels to 900 meters above sea level. And there are intersecting fault lines in the area. There are two slides which are shown. The bottom one depicts the bauxite in the lowland area as well as the hillocks on which the vegetation is concentrated, which is the area of high biodiversity. Now, what is bauxite? Bauxite is a soil. It is known as terrassa in Jamaica because it is red. It is the commercial soil for the production of aluminum metal. Our bauxite is fine grain, and therefore, when it is wet, it usually contains about 20 to 25% moisture. When it begins to rain, you cannot mine Jamaica bauxite because it is extremely sticky and difficult to handle. We discovered bauxite in Jamaica in the late 40s, and this was done by Sir Alfred da Costa, who found that it was extremely difficult to grow anything on his lands because of the natural infertility. So he decided to investigate it, and he found, through consultation with the government chemist at the time, who did some analysis, that our soils were rich in aluminum, and this was proven by confirmatory test in England. And the results came back saying that you might not be able to grow bananas, but in the near future, you'll be able to produce airplanes. The Daily Gleaner at the time reported on its front page, red gold going for the first time. So this finite mineral resource has been very important in the development of Jamaica's economy for several decades. Now, I'd like to show you some of the images, the slides, the photographs, which represent what the area looks like. And you will see that the bauxite occurs or in depressions between the hillocks. That is the low-lying deposits of these bauxite support mainly grassland or shrub vegetation, and there are agricultural activities which take place on some of them. These bauxitic lands do not support the growth of large trees. For those of us on TV, you can see that there is an area to the left top which is intensively under agriculture. You can see yam cultivation and some banana trees closer to us in the foreground. And you can also see some residential areas, some human settlements, houses in the background. To the right, there is land which is under preparation for agriculture, and the hillocks in the background show the high concentration of vegetation. We also have illustrations of other areas showing, for example, more agricultural activities and deposits of bauxite in the lowlands. There is also an illustration of the high biodiversity which is found on the hillocks and the agricultural plots. And finally, there are well-defined agricultural activities at different stages of development, from advanced growth, maturity, and under preparation. The geology and the geomorphology showed that there are some 11 documented caves within the boundaries of SML 173. The caves observed were elevated on the hillocks. In other words, they weren't on the same level or plane as the bauxite deposits. There are 27 documented caves outside of SML 173, but these are also important, and these are found within a radius of about 5 kilometers. It is important to note that the sinkholes do not occur on the bauxite ore bodies. The image shows drip cave, which is elevated on a hillock, and also what it looks like when you're in drip cave and look out. The hydrology and the hydrogeology, that is the water resources, are important. There are no rivers or streams, and SML 173 sits on top of an aquifer. Groundwater beneath SML 173 is at a depth of some 100 meters or 300 feet. And the SML 173 area is located upstream the Dornoch Blue Hole headwaters of the Rio Bena. It is highly unlikely that the aquifer in the Rio Bena catchment or subbasin will be impacted if the ore bodies within SML 173 are mined. This simply illustrates, ladies and gentlemen, the three areas, SML 173 and the designated coffee country area, and those points at which dyes were injected to see what were the direction of flows subsurface to SML 173. And this was done by the Water Resources Authority and also by other investigators. In the upper watershed areas where SML 173 is located, the depth to groundwater is greater than 300 meters. Bauxite is not found at the depth of groundwater in SML 173, and it's important that we stress this. It is found at an average of 10 meters above beneath the surface, and at the greatest depth, 30 to 35 meters. Description of the environment continued with air and noise quality. We had to do the baseline, and so we did some modeling and we did some actual measurements. And in all cases, we found that the air quality in the area was very good, and it was in keeping with and will be maintained within during the operation all of the standards that are required for maintaining human health. There will be no noise associated which will exceed NEPA's standard of 75 decibel, and no vibration was detected. Now, we investigated the biological resources, and we found that the general area may be described as disturbed forest with two major types of habitats. One, the elevated forested areas, which is on the hillsides or hillocks, and secondly, the open bauxite-bearing grassland depression. In comparison with the open bauxite-bearing grassland depression, the elevated limestone hillocks have a high level of biodiversity. No mining will take place in those areas. But what did we find? In terms of species of trees, we found 35, of which 5 were endemics. The bromeliads, we found 6, of which 2 species were endemic. The aroids, we found 3 species. Orchids, we found 3 species, and 1 species was endemic. And among the ferns, we found 3 species, and 1 was endemic. The herbs, there were 14. The vines, there were 16 species, of which 4 were endemic. And among the shrubs, we found 21 species, and 5 were endemic. The grasses, we found 3 species. And the commercial crops, we found 12 species of different type of produce under cultivation. These images show the typical type of vegetation on the hillocks from top to bottom. You also see a flowering plant there, as well as a fern or non-flowering plant. And beneath that, you will see the Trinox palm, as well as a bromeliad. Another flowering plant to the bottom, Biden spilosa, and one of the grasses found. You will see that the area is not pristine because the hillside is disturbed by human activity. And to the right, there's another image which shows cultivation with underway with the preparation. And in the background, we see the densely vegetated hillocks. The image at the top shows an area with low-lying bauxite and some grassland. Among the animals, we found that there were some 46 species of birds, and 19 of these species of birds were endemic. That means they're found only in Jamaica. We found 8 species of lizard and 3 species of frogs or amphibians. And among the arthropods, or those organisms with external skeletons, we found 47 species, of which 2 of them were endemic. The snails, among them we found 3 species, and among the mammals, which are mainly bats, we found 9 species. The other domesticated mammals that we found were, for example, donkeys and goats and cows. And among those which are not domesticated, we found mongoose and rats. Now, it is very important that you note, ladies and gentlemen, that we are aware that it is possible that the giant swallowtail butterfly, which we formerly call Papilio humerus, is very important and it is endangered. And consequently, we carried out intensive and extensive searches variously looking for the butterfly, but we did not find it. There were no sightings of this butterfly. The water maho, which is a tree that is important for supporting the life cycle of the butterfly, we also searched for it intensively, and we did not find it. And of course, this tells us that the picture, what we found from the investigations, the insect populations, was accurate and precise. And we know that it complies with what is in the literature concerning this butterfly as well. Now, this slide, for those who can see on television, just shows some of the 19 species of endemic birds that we found in the area during the course of our investigation. And some of these birds we see regularly all over the place. For example, number 10, Trochilus polytmus is a national bird, or the doctor bird. And above that, you know, we have others which we commonly call as little boys antspica. It's a warbler. And then we have one species of endangered birds only, which is number 6, and that is the yellow-billed parrot. And this is recorded by the IUCN as being vulnerable. Among the lizard and the frog, we found, for example, 4 lizards, including our polylizard that you find commonly about the place, then our green lizard and other anole lizards in the area. Amphibians, frogs, as we mentioned, 3 species are also in the area, and we found them in the grassland, and as you probably know, they're also associated with certain plants known as epiphytes, which we have water located in them, such as the tank bromeliads. There are also various insects, and so we found, for example, the glossy flower beetle, a millipede, and we found various types of flies and wasps. Now, we had to carry out a comprehensive socioeconomic and cultural investigation, and we did this by administering a questionnaire among some 325 individuals. And the findings showed us that the level of poverty is relatively high in the area. Most people that are employed $50,000 or less per month. And the full-time and part-time employment is about 50-50. Now, when we ask the people, what do you know about bauxite mining or what would be their concerns? Those with the exception of Brownstone said that they were optimistic about the provision of jobs, the opportunities for them, but they're also concerned about the potential for changes in the landscape and the aesthetics, damage to their water resources, that is their storage systems, and also dust pollution. The land use generally falls into 5 major categories. These are built up or urban areas, bauxite mining and rehabilitated areas, the forested areas and mixed woodland, shrubland, grassland, and agricultural activities, including yam cultivation. As mentioned at the beginning, Noranda also commissioned an independent investigation of the historical heritage and archaeological heritage resources in the area, and this was done by the Jamaican National Heritage Trust. They found that there are 204 sites of interest in the area, and there were some of these sites just outside of the areas. And this is recorded in a separate volume, which is a companion volume of the EIA report, volume 3. And the sites vary from high significance to medium to low significance. This slide shows 2 vernacular houses. It shows 3 churches. You probably are present at one of these churches at the present time. It shows also 2 cut stone house foundations, and it shows historical graves. Now, it is important to stress the following in doing the impact identification. The project will not involve any mining in the forest reserves or the hillocks. It will not impact on caves and sinkholes, which will be protected. It will not impact on declared heritage site facilities, which will be protected. Neither will it impact on water resources, which are found beneath the ground at a depth of 100 meters. It will not result in any wide-scale dislocation of households, and as far as practicable, any household to be affected will be accommodated in the same community or as close as possible to the original community. In respect of the types of impacts which we identified, the potential negative impacts could be a temporary change in the land use, that is from mining, and after rehabilitation back into agricultural activities or various other types of agricultural activities as the need, may arise. There will be changes in the drainage regime, which will manage, and the potential for increased rain runoff, water, and possibly erosion. There could be noise, but there are measures to manage noise. There could be dislocation of households, and this will be carefully done if it has to take place. And there could be a temporary loss of income to the subsistence farmers. On the positive side of the potential impacts, we found that there are major contributions to Jamaica's economy and to the local economies by the operations. There are also the potential for developments in agriculture, improved standard of living, community benefits from Noranda's social development program. Now, in terms of impact mitigation, the haul roads that will be created will be properly maintained. There will be dust suppression. The natural drainage will be maintained as far as possible. There will be the use of portable toilets, the use of silencers or mufflers on construction equipment. The footprints of the operation will be strictly maintained to that which is unavoidable, which is 15% of the SML 173 area. Removal and relocation of sensitive species of plants will be done before the commencement of construction of all roads and mining. And these species will be stored in greenhouses or be placed in other areas which will not be impacted. Noranda will fully implement, as it has always done, its environmental health and safety policies and procedures at all phases of the project. And Noranda will employ its relocation or compensation plans and comply with the requirements of the Mining Act. It is also obliged to act in keeping with the Jamaica National Heritage Trust Act. Intersections will be actively monitored in order to ensure traffic safety, and safety signs will be installed. These images show the obvious stop sign and the caution to stop, look, and listen, and dust suppression, which is being done using a water tanker, a tanker fitted with a sprinkler. This shows an employee removing sensitive species of plant and putting them in a greenhouse or in other areas in SML 173. This was done in SML 165, but this would also be practiced if a permit is issued in SML 173. To the right, we can see a rehabilitated area, which shows what it looks like after mining has been completed and the area has been rehabilitated and is ready to be returned to other types of uses. We can see here progressive steps in the process. One shows bauxite mining underway and the hillocks undisturbed. The other shows on completion of mining that the area is revegetated, and to the right you see what this revegetated area look like with a luxuriant growth of grass. Now finally, ladies and gentlemen, we had to do an alternative analysis. We said, what can we do or what can't we do as far as the project is concerned? The first one is the no action alternative, which simply says do nothing. The second one is to relocate in another location in which there could be bauxite, and there's none that has been identified at this time. And the proposed project activity, which we presented in front of you, which is mining as is in all of SML 173. And finally, modifying SML 173, and we present to you what has been sent to the regulators. We show that there will be no mining in the forested areas. Neither will there be any mining in a cloudback area in which we have intensive agricultural activity, inclusive of yam farming taking place. So then what remains in SML 173 for mining? It is just that yellow or cream portion that is shown in the slide. Just to conclude this aspect, if there is no mining in SML 173, it simply means that Noranda does not have bauxite to continue to support its operation, and it will close down. And it means that the 80 to 150 million United States dollars a year, which it earns for itself and the country, will not be earned in the future. And the 3,000 jobs which we mentioned would have been lost, and their contributions to the local and the national economy would be lost. The proposed activity would be impacted, and the clawback era activity on mining, we consider this as the better or preferred alternative in which to proceed. Now, finally, environmental management and monitoring for any project must take place, and these are always placed as condition in a permit. And the parameters which would have to be monitored in SML 173 should a permit be granted include noise, air quality, water quality, waste management, landscape and visual, soil conservation, chemical waste and control of spills, traffic and access, environmental management and monitoring responsibilities. And all of these would have to be reported to the regulators on a periodic basis as agreed. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I must express our gratitude for the cooperation and assistance that we got from several agencies in the preparation of this environmental impact assessment. Without your cooperation and without your support, it would not have been possible to get to this stage. And so I must mention the National Environment and Planning Agency, the Water Resources Authority, the Forestry Department, Jamaica National Heritage Trust, the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, for which we got data variously, Institute of Jamaica, which provided information, Jamaica Environment Trust, which we consulted with at the beginning of the process, Southern Trelawney Environment Agency, whom we also met on at least 3 occasions throughout the entire process, and the Windsor Research Center, which we visited and consulted with their CEO, Cockpit Country Warriors, which are present at this meeting, the community members throughout SML 173, Retreat Basic School, Madras Primary School and Junior High School, Sawyers Primary School, also Spring Primary School and Junior High, and also Spring Baptist Church, Endeavor Anglican Church, and the Gibraltar Primary School. Thank you very much for your kind attention, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Conrad Douglas. And before we go to the break, let me remind you, if you're just joining, that this is a mandatory mixed virtual public meeting for the environmental impact assessment for the proposed bauxite mining operations by Noranda Jamaica Bauxite Partners 2 in the Special Mining Lease 173 located in the parishes of Trelawney and St. Anne. Before we go to the break, let me tell you, after the break, we are coming for your comments and your questions, so have them ready. Thank you so much. We go to our break. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
invited to participate in the meeting through a question and answer segment. You're being reminded that the questions may be sent through Zoom or WhatsApp. Here's the number again, 876-878-1356. That's 876-878-1356. Or telephone 876-733-2461 to 6. 876-733-2461 to 6, as well as from our satellite locations. And members of the public at the satellite locations or who are participating by phone are reminded to say your name and the community that you represent or organization that you are affiliated with for the official records of this meeting. We will now begin taking questions.
Greetings. Mr. Douglas, we met Dr. Douglas, we met some time ago.
Douglas, we met Dr. Douglas, we met some time ago.
You've done an amazing professional job of a presentation. But what we want to say is this: we have our.
All right, okay. I'm sorry. My name is Emmanuel Campbell. I'm sorry. My name is Emmanuel. And I'm from the Alps community.
Alps, he's from the Alps community, ALPS.
Right. Just like Noranda, which has done an amazing job at presenting what he has presented, we have our own presentation, what we have to do. We had plans for the area which you're proposing to mine. And we'd just like to show you part of these, speak to you about a part of these plans. There's a young man, he grew up in Alps, and he has just a small statement to say to you. His name is Tevin Sampson.
All right, bring him on, but remember we have so many other people waiting with questions. So yes, sir, go right ahead with your question or comment. Go ahead, sir.
Greetings, Jamaica. My name is Tevin Simpson, and I hail from the community of Alps. The question I have is that, what will we do with our farms? So we know that Bauxite has a plan, but our communities have a better plan. There are thousands of acreage of arable lands filled with rich soil nutrients, perfectly and readily available for agricultural production. Bauxite is an impediment to agriculture as it will slow the cultivation process, and we intend to initiate a working project, a multi-billion-dollar one, and we cannot afford to sacrifice maximum agricultural production for a minute production. And our project will endlessly provide food for the nation and continuously to boost the declining GDP and drive economic development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I ask Mr. Dell from...
Thank you so much, Tevin. We do have a plan, and we
hang on, sir.
Taking up the first hour, so let's see what happens now.
Okay, thanks, sir. We're going to have a response.
Okay,
Dr. Douglas?
Mr. Campbell, it's nice seeing you again. We met
Dr. Douglas?
Mr. Campbell, it's nice. Nice seeing you again, and we met variously in the field as we carried out the investigations, and we are grateful to you and the other members of the community for the cooperation we received during the process. We have noted what has been expressed by Mr. Johnson, and we consider it as being very, very important as well. But let me stress that Noranda, in exercising its corporate social responsibility process, recognize the importance of the livelihoods of the people in the area and the need for the continued production by the farmers. So that, for example, as you will see from the last slide presented, there is a cloudback area that will be left in intensive agriculture. And in addition to that, at the outset, I did say that mining will be done over a period of 25 years with the development of 5-year mining plans. And this 5-year mining plan must be subject to approvals and to permits. Before those are done, Noranda will notify those persons who are involved in the use of those lands, who privately own those lands, compensate them as necessary, and make provisions for that production to take place elsewhere. So all of the area could not be and will not be mined at the same time. It will be mined in 5-year mining plants, and at the end of it, it will be rehabilitated and returned to the owner for production. We mentioned that 55% of the area is owned by the government of Jamaica, and Noranda manages this on behalf of the Commission of Mines. We also mentioned that the rest is privately owned. We also mentioned that there's 70% of the area that has titles, and that Noranda already has the rights to 55% of the area. The fact of the matter is that these matters and your proposal require consultations, and Noranda will engage in consultations with all the communities prior to and during the entire process of mining. And let me say that it is standard practice in Noranda to form community councils with all the communities in which it operates. And it is quite possible that you will be a member of this community council as well. So please take this into account.
We have a very animated person seated there, but let me go to a WhatsApp question. The question is, I have yet to hear how exactly they will go about rehabilitating the area or how exactly restoration will be done. Who will take that?
Rehabilitation is a standard process. And what it involves when mining is complete is to reshape the area. And as I said at the beginning also, 24 inches of topsoil, which is the most fertile part of the soil, is put in storage, and this is placed on the top. The images that are shown show farmers that are actually engaged in agricultural production, planting sweet potato in the area. Cassava grow in the area, yam also grow in the area, and as I mentioned, there are 12 different types of plant crops that we identify that were thriving in the area on the rehabilitated lands.
All right, let me see who's next. Where's our next question coming from? We do have, may I remind, here we go. What kind of research was done to identify and quantify the full range of existing and potential income generating activities in the area and assess the likely impacts of bauxite mining on those activities?
There's always scope for further research and development. And the fact of the matter is that with the establishment of community councils and your interaction with Noranda, there will be opportunities to identify other activities that could be of value in bringing more income to the area. At this time, all of those activities that the persons living in the area were engaged in were determined through the consultations by the survey that I mentioned earlier on. So Noranda will engage members of the community, seek other opportunities, and engage in them as long as they can be beneficial and profitable to members of the community. And Noranda and other entities may find it possible to support them with financing.
We have another question from Tony Greenaway. In the atmospheric dispersion modeling, why did you not include receptors in the vicinity of the railheads at Tobolski and Water Valley? The report indicates that Tobolski is the principal source of pollutants reaching SML 173. How do you know that the dispersion model's predictions are reasonable?
Very good question, Dr. Greenaway. I recognize you and recognize your question. And it's very good to see you participating as a colleague from the chemistry department of the University of the West Indies. If you read the model carefully and the results, you will see that it says that 50% to 60% there is a decline in terms of what the ambient air quality standard states. And this is measured against what is necessary to protect human health. And it says that within 100 meters of the point sources identified, the concentrations will decline to 80% within 80% of the standard. So that modeling was done, of course, to predict what might happen, and it says so quite adequately. Tobolski and Water Valley are loadout stations which have been in operation for as long as Noranda and Kaiser Bauxite have been in operation. All of the standards are maintained, actual measurements are carried out, and not just predictive modeling. And this is done on an ongoing basis by the use of high volume samplers and micro volume samplers, which are state of the art, and all of them are calibrated. And the data must be reported to NEPA on a regular basis, on a monthly basis. And that is always done.
We have another question. The EIA states that air quality will be addressed using internationally accepted standards. Why then was PM2.5 not included in the dispersion modeling, particularly when the EIA indicates that the average bauxite particle size is 0.5 microns?
It is very important, the question that you ask. PM10, which is a particle size of 10 microns in diameter, is what is usually done and measured. That is the standard, and that is what is used in relation to the ambient air quality standards, PM10, and that is what must be done, and will be done on an ongoing basis.
All right, we have another one. We're going over to Endeavor, so let us get our participant from Endeavor. Let us get our participant from Endeavor. Let us get our participant from Endeavor. Let us get our...
But if I may just add a rejoinder, Madam Chair,
Yes,
to the previous question.
Yes, go ahead. We're just waiting.
It is very important, ladies and gentlemen, that we do not mislead ourselves into thinking that even without bauxite mining, that we don't have dust and dust dispersion. Without bauxite mining, the same quality material, chemically and mineralogically, exists. And if it is dry and exposed, you will get it being entrained and blown about by the wind. The fact that bauxite mining takes place is just simply pointing to the point sources that could arise. As I mentioned, our bauxite is fine grain, that is Jamaican bauxite, and when it is wet, it is very sticky. There is also dust suppression methods that are used. It is so sticky that you have to dry the bauxite to get it to flow. And that is the reality of the situation. So we need to bear those things in mind.
Thank you, Dr. Douglas. Are we ready for Endeavor? I think Endeavor is ready for us, but no, we're not quite there. So could you give me another question from the WhatsApp line or the, okay, we have Dr. Green, again, why does the EIA not recommend the need for background and community impact air quality monitoring sites in addition to the maximum impact sites as required by the AQ guidelines? Dr. Douglas, is that you?
Thanks, Madam Chairman. Let me just state that there were several steps that were mentioned, 10 of them in the whole process of the development of bauxite resources. And there were 5 principal steps. When we submitted the environmental impact assessment report to NEPA, let me point out that NEPA themselves stated and recommended that we place samplers out in the field for a further extended period of time, and that we continue to monitor and measure PM10 concentration for as long as the operations will ever take place. So that's an important thing. When you are going to place monitors out in the field, you have to do this according to the 5-year mine plan, which will be developed. And this will be fine-tuned at the time, and the monitors will be put in place. The measurements done on a periodic basis, and the data will be placed in reports and sent in or submitted to NEPA.
All right. Yes, we have an addition of Mrs. Nelson.
I also added that Noranda's commitment, our commitment to environmental protection goes beyond just doing an environmental impact assessment. For the past 4 years, we have placed additional dust monitoring stations in different communities just outside of the required standard by NEPA. This is to show our level of commitment to ensure that dust mitigation is measured and ensure that we continue as it relates to mining as good corporate citizen, and that's important.
Thank you. That's a serious concern
May I
that people
just
have,
add,
so I'm
Madam
glad you're...
Chairman?
Yes, and Endeavor is ready, so go
I'm
quickly for me,
sorry.
Doc.
I should give the participants the opportunity to speak, but just let me add that the very last part of the presentation spoke to an environmental management and monitoring plan. And that is something with which Noranda must comply. And all of the conditions that are stated there, the parameters, will be placed into the permit if one is granted as conditions with which they must comply.
Thank you. Our friends over in Endeavor, I think we're ready to go to them. So let us get to Endeavor and hear what they have to say, what questions or comments they may have.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Good evening.
I'm from Madras, representative. My name is Mr. Hamilton. I have a few questions, but one of the burning one, what I want to ask, we realize and we understand that through the ages from Kaiser days, we have been blaming the Bauxite company. We put a lot of blame on them. But I have one question to ask. We know that the Bauxite company always get 49% from the bauxite, and the government get 51%. When we look at our road instructor of this area where mining has been taking place, is a disgrace. We want to know what happened to those funds. Where is it spending? Why it is not spending on our road? All we need over here, our major problem is our roads. And when you travel from Madras to Brownstone or from Wattown to Sendake or anywhere over the globe through the communities and look at the road, it's a disgrace. We want to know that the money is supposed to spend within the mining community, and there's none with we spending. Noranda is trying their best. They give scholarship and they help out in sport, they help out in health and all over. We want the government to declare what is happening to our funds, what it is doing, where is it spending.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very, very much. So that will be a question for the government to attend to, but perhaps, Mr. Dell, you have a comment you'd like to make as the...
Yes, what I would add is the ability of the government to fund expenditure for repair of roads and public infrastructure is very much dependent on the ability of companies like Noranda to continue to operate. And this project, if we were to fail to obtain the required permits, will lead to the closure of Noranda and the loss of all of those jobs and the royalties, revenues, taxes, which would be used by the government to fund such works such as road repairs.
Thank you.
So I am fully supportive of the gentleman's comments.
Thank you. That's Mr. Delroy Dale, the Vice President and General Manager of Noranda, Jamaica. Retreat. I know you're not going to retreat, so come on up, retreat.
To fund such works such as road repairs.
Retreat, we are hearing, we are with you now, so ask your, and everybody, look here, enough question, enough people. So try just make it tight, one question, and let us get the answers. Let's go. Retreat? Retreat is gone? Throw me a question from WhatsApp or the phone line then. Retreat, okay. Here is Mr. Moody. Why was SML 173 granted by Mines and Geology in August 2018 in advance of this EIA and public consultation process? Doesn't that signal the decision to go ahead has already been taken at the highest level and this entire process is a sham? Go back to the top of that question for me, please. Just go back to the top. It says, why was SML 173 granted by Mines and Geology in August 2018 in advance of this?
The government granted SML 173 the mining lease in 2018, but one part of the terms and conditions for the execution of that lease is a requirement for environmental permits to be obtained. So although a lease was granted, it said subject to the acquisition of the permits, environmental permits, mining actually could not start any at all.
So you have done no work in the area,
No work has
sir?
been done.
No
It's-
clearing of anything?
No.
None.
No getting rid of anybody's farms?
And this is part of the process of ensuring that the permits are acquired. This is a requirement of the process to ensure that permits are obtained.
I hope that answers your question.
And that
which
is why it was
yes,
stressed, Madam Chair,
yes,
at a
Dr. Douglas.
very, during the presentation, that no mining can be done unless the necessary approvals and environmental permits are issued. None.
But you understand maybe where the person is coming from. It looks like it's being
Yes,
done
the
the back ways.
sequence, the sequence. But you know, one must recognize that in the past, you didn't need an environmental permit to do certain types of mining at all.
But may I add?
But in 2015, there was an amendment to that.
May I
And
add?
this is just coming into
may I add-
force as well. So we need to recognize that for the sequence, yes.
Yes.
May
Go
I
ahead,
do,
Mr.
Conrad, that the permits, we have been through this application process for the permits for how long? Well over a year,
Yes.
right?
Just over a year.
Yeah.
So if this was a rubber stamping of
2018.
the mining lease and the execution of mining, I would think that the permits would have been granted a long time ago.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dell. Retreat, are you with us now?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah, go ahead with your question, please. Make it tight and short and to the point.
Christopher Pedley Bowen,
Go ahead, Mr. Boyne.
a committee member. I have noticed, I have listened to the presentation. I hear the good things about the job, over 600 job, 3 by 3. Sometimes the persons who benefit from mining, they will benefit from a better home, albeit that our community never benefited whilst Tubalski and Water Valley was done. The national budget, of course, will benefit from increased US dollars. Water, I hear about dust nuisance. I remember another company in St. Catherine. There was a well just half-mile from us. That the Bauxite company, Kaiser Bauxite, used to draw water from. And that well is now abandoned because it was said that the water was tainted, contaminated by that well out at the mud lake in St. Catherine. I have listened to the presenter about Lloydersville, all the way in St. Catherine. Up to now, we are not benefiting from our running water. The name Noranda Bauxite Company, partner. We are not in any partnership with them. They get out what they want and they leave. And when you look at our roads, it is not a partnership. It is, the Bible tells me that a good father leaves some inheritance for the kids. If they were any father, I would never want to tell anybody.
All right, sir,
You
thank
understand? The
you.
main road through Retreat, if the road from Brownstown to Jacksontown is blocked, Retreat is the alternate route. There was a big tractor that came in and tell Mr. all of those people to go there. I know that whilst the cockpit country goes all the way up to St. James, St. Elizabeth, and I am aware that perhaps only 15%, I am told, will be mined. But we are going to be affected.
All right,
The
so
people
thank
of
you. We
Arts
have a long
also
line of
spring,
other
and whilst that man
questions.
tell you about
Sir?
his big plan.
Sir, thank you very much. We have a long line of other questioners. I don't know if you want to comment on that road situation at all. Mr. Dell? No? Yes?
Roads and public infrastructure is planned, executed by the government of Jamaica.
And you have nothing to do with it at all?
That's not our role. We assist wherever possible to fix some parochial roads here and there in the communities. But clearly, our business can't fund the whole scale repair of all the roads in the mining areas which we operate. But we do assist as much as possible to fix some community roads, but we couldn't.
So the contract that the government gives you doesn't say that you must fix roads?
No, that's not a requirement of our mining lease and our operations.
All right, because, so clearly from the question, some people believe that's the case. So you wanted to say something, Mrs. Nelson?
May I also added, I understand your concern, but if you look at our history, you can see that when we leave out of a community, most of our roads turn over to the community, and we actually improve the roads within these communities, because that's important to us. And that's what, when we speak about a partnership, that's what we'll speak about and do. So that's important to note.
Thank you so much. Alta Spring, you're there. So much. How are you doing in Alta Spring? How are you doing in Alta Spring? How are you? Go ahead for me, please. Ask your question. Remember, friends, we need to have the questions short.
My name is Edward Smith, and I am from the community of Rock Spring, which is not very far from here, from the organization of the Southern Choroni Environmental Agency. I have seen bauxite mining right across Jamaica, and I've heard the stories, and we all have heard the stories. Let us not fool ourselves. 25 years from now is not so much of a long time, but if it go by age, some of us in this church and on that panel won't be around to see it. So my question to Naranda, my question to Jamaica, the government of Jamaica, is, would you cut off the foot and sell it for a pair of shoes?
Thank you so much, sir. He says his question to the government and to Jamaica.
Well, if you buy the shoes after that, you don't have no foot to put it on, right?
Oh boy. All right.
But no one is doing that sort of thing at all, Madam Chair. I too and several others have the experience of bauxite mining and alumina production, which is not the subject of this evening's meeting, throughout Jamaica for many, many years. And the fact of the matter is that nothing is ideal or perfect in life, nothing. But the truth is that the bauxite and alumina sector in Jamaica has been very, very important to the development and its contribution to the national economy. That cannot be denied. The bauxite alumina sector was #1 in terms of the performance and contribution to the national economy for several decades. And even when it is depressed, it has never performed below being among the 3 major sectors in Jamaica's economy. And if you look across the nation, it can't be denied in terms of the contribution to education, in terms of health infrastructure, recreation, agriculture, the bauxite, alumina, and infrastructure, ports, and so on. Even roadways, community centers, scholarships, it's incomparable. There's no other sector that has probably done as much in terms of national development, human resource development, as the bauxite alumina sector has done. And so, you know, and you need to make this distinction, and probably I'm talking a little bit too much. The bauxite and alumina sector performs and it provides the income to be used for various development projects. And this is what has been the policy of the government of Jamaica for the past 50, 60 years.
Nice.
It's very important.
Thank you,
But
Dr.
what has happened? A lot of the money has gone into budgetary support rather than invest in those capital development programs, such as light industry and so on and so forth.
Thank you for
and
that
we need to face the
distinction.
facts.
Thank you. Audie Morgan, Cockpit Country Warriors Group. Could I see that? Seeing the results of the latest devastation to our infrastructure during the last rainy season, it is evident that the government is not good stewards of our environment. And given the conditions of the roads in St. Anne, why should we trust Naranda to do any better in SML 173? But it seems to me the question is dealing with the government, but it's also dealing with Naranda. So you can only answer the part to deal with Naranda. Ms. Adele?
I think Naranda can be trusted. Naranda has had a history of good social partnership with the communities. And at the risk of repeating some of the things which Dr. Douglas said, we have the investment in education, which I am not aware of any other bauxite entity in Jamaica which spends as much money. Every year, we have 200 to 300 students given scholarships, every level, primary level, secondary, tertiary level. There are many infrastructural projects which we fund as well. I think maybe we don't highlight them enough. The Kaiser Ward at St. Anne, built by one of our predecessor companies. The 5 greenhouse clusters which have been established in our mining areas. St. Anne and most of the areas which has this limestone suffers from shortages of water. We have implemented in several communities, we have used our ponds, we have converted the mined out ore bodies to ponds, and those ponds are used to harvest rainwater, making water easy to access and a reliable source of ensuring that the crops are always watered and farmers can have a more dependable income right throughout the year. I think projects such as those speak significantly to some of the good, the social good which this company has done. And I don't think we can afford to disregard them.
Okay, sir, thank you. And now we go over to Alta Spring again. I think we have someone there. Got to ask you, remember to keep your questions tight. We're trying to get as many people in as possible. And for those questions that are not handled here in this meeting, remember, please submit anyway, because there's going to, I'll tell you at the end that there will be this verbatim notes and those questions and all of that before anything else can happen that must go to NEPA and must be placed in spaces and areas where you can get to them and see them. Yes, Alta Spring? Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead with your question. It's good to see you.
From the Albertown area. I wanted to ask Mr. Douglas this. You spoke about modeling. Now, this modeling that you speak of, under what conditions were they done? Were they only done here in Trelawney? Because I'm quite surprised that other communities around Jamaica, I think you are the person who does most of the EIAs, from what I get to understand, because I've been studying you. And they speak of the negative impacts of bauxite, right? They speak of the dust, where the respiratory system is concerned, the infertility of their lands. So that modeling that you have done, if it's the same modeling here for our Trelawney, God help us. Mr. Douglas, I've met with you. I think you're quite an intelligent man. But I want to know under what conditions this modeling was done. Because
thank you very much, ma'am.
I live here in Trelawney. I know on rainy days, it's not a pretty sight.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Dr. Douglas, you need to answer that question.
Yes.
Under what conditions did you do that modeling?
Okay, let me put this. A model really is an instrument. It's a piece of software that you use to predict what is likely to happen. And it is based on what you put into the model and the particular location in which it's carried out. So the lady is correct. But model is predictive and it is fundamentally theoretical. It has to be validated. It has to be proven. And so what is done? You have to carry out actual measurements about and prove what it says. And this is when you put in the instruments out in the field to do the measurements. And you say, yes, this was accurate, or it was not, or it was precise, or it was not.
So let me extend the lady's question. So the modeling was done. Was the measurement done, or when will that be done?
Only when, if a permit is granted, the operations can be done, and then the instruments placed out in the field and the actual measurements done, as is now in the case with the existing operations.
Yeah, you wanted to say, Mrs. Nelson?
May I add that Noranda, we are operating for over 50 years, and we are currently in SML 165 and 172. And in Jamaica, you have various standards that you must meet. And I'm telling you, as the environmental manager with the Noranda team, that we always go well below the required standard, and that is important. So we implement specific measures in place to ensure that we reduce any form of fugitive dust that our operation may generate. And this include the wetting of roads, scheduled wetting of road. This also include using what we have, plant-based material, to ensure that we reduce fugitive dusting. And not
the
only
fugitive
that,
dust at all, the dust just
yes,
fly up
any dust that
anywhere.
fly.
Okay.
You drive through Jamaica, you drive on the road, anywhere in Jamaica, that dust that you see, that's what we refer to as fugitive dust. But not only that, but we also have several machines that we have dust monitors in various communities to ensure that this is monitored on every every 6 days, and also the report is generated to NEPA. That is also a public knowledge, so you can check those data as well to show that we are really having sustainable company and good corporate citizen over the years with strong Jamaican partnership.
Let me go over to Retreat. Retreat, and please, when we come to you for the questions, try to make the question tight for me, please. Once you have asked it, then I'm going to cut in and I'm going to ask for it to be answered, all right? Retreat?
Ask for it to be answered, all right?
Where are our friends from Retreat? Where are the committee members who are there in Retreat?
Town hall meeting.
Yes,
I'm just
sir.
going to be very brief.
Yes,
Two quick
sir.
questions. Of the lands mined out so far, with over a 50-year history, what percentage would you say is fully reclaimed? That's one question. And the second question is, based on the topographic and the hydrogeographic importance of the general area, do you believe it's worth the risk to even slightly disturb the area, knowing that the impact can be permanently devastating and irreplaceable?
Two good questions there in terms of what percentage of the lands that have been fully reclaimed. Mr. Dale.
No, I'll take part one.
Yes.
Reclamation. Since the operations began in 1967, we have disturbed just over 3,000 hectares. And so far, up to maybe a couple of days ago, we have successfully reclaimed 92% of all of those lands. And what do I mean by successful reclamation? We reclaimed. The government inspectors from the Mines and Geology Department inspect the lands and certify them as passed. They have met successfully the reclamation standards outlined by the government.
Thank you. Now, the other part of that question, a very important part, is this granting of this lease worth the risk? Dr. Douglas.
Very important point the gentleman has raised. And we are aware of the importance of the groundwater resources in the area. And they're so important that no one would want to do anything whatsoever to impact negatively on them. The fact of the matter is, as I mentioned, there is an important aquifer beneath SML 173, but that is located at a depth of 100 meters or 300 feet below the surface of the earth. The bauxite is at a depth of about 10 meters on average. So after you remove that 10 meters, you still have 90 meters of solid limestone, which is compact and which acts as a good filter before you get to the water resources down there. If there were any risk to those water resources whatsoever, I would advise Noranda and the government not to touch it. But we are confident that based on what has happened with bauxite mining, with similar water resources throughout the entire island. For example, the Rio Minnow water resources in Clarendon, Rio Cobra, St. Catherine, Goshen Pepper well fields in St. Elizabeth, and of course the porous well fields in Manchester, all of which we have had bauxite mining. The flow rates for those groundwater resources and the quality of the water has not been impacted over these 60 years.
Thank you.
And let me just say that it doesn't end there, because Noranda is committed to monitor anything in the area to do with water quality. And if they were to be granted a permit, I believe that the National Environmental and Planning Agency, Water Resources Authority, would ensure that the conditions are in that permit to protect water resources that might be in the area.
Thank you, Dr. Douglas. Question. Wonderful job in the Gibraltar and neighboring communities, but I'm asking if they could assist us in fixing the Gibraltar to Brownstown road again, because it is in a bad state. And when we have emergencies like taking a sick to hospital, St. Anne's Bay Hospital, sometimes a person or persons die on the way because of the bad roads. Please try and help us. Thanks in advance. Are you that, Mr. Bell?
We'll look and see what we can do.
Is that an empty promise?
No, that's not an empty promise. We'll try. We'll try and see what we
I
can.
heard you.
Yes.
Okay, all
Madam
right.
Chair,
Take us at our word.
if I can just speak.
Yes,
But
sir.
the interests of the community members and the resources must be Noranda's interest as well,
Indeed.
because that's where they get their employees from. And if they were to disturb water resources and so on, and they don't have water for their own operations, they cannot operate. So we must bear these things in mind also.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
Chair-
we're going to a
Chairperson.
question, but do a quick.
Yes, quickly. Even presently, we are funding the repairs of several roads in the operating areas. But of course, we can't do all the roads at one time. If there's an overwhelming request for an area where we can provide assistance, then we can prioritize, right, from our community development projects budget. But we can't address all roads, and we can't be the major fixer of roads throughout the entire mining.
And you have to get the government's permission before you do that?
Well, in some cases, yes. Parochial roads, you'll have to interact with the NAA. You need permission before you can do anything like that.
All right.
But we'll try and assist.
Thank you. Now here's another one. The archaeological impact assessment conducted by the Jamaica National Heritage Trust said mining of the area could hamper Jamaica's quest to be placed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Does mining trump World Heritage designation? Dr. Douglas. Dr. Douglas.
No.
We wouldn't want that.
Absolutely important question. The fact of the matter is the Jamaica National Heritage Trust also, like ourselves, did a thorough investigation of the heritage resources in the area. And they identified some designated heritage sites. And we state that these must be protected. And there are certain protocols with which Noranda must work closely with the Jamaica National Heritage Trust to ensure that these are done. And furthermore, in the JNHT Act itself, there is a provision that should you, during the process of mining, come across an artifact or something of archaeological value or importance, you must immediately stop mining and contact the Jamaica National Heritage Trust, ask them to visit and determine what is the best way forward. A cockpit country protected area, which is the core cockpit country, has now been designated for the first time. Let's face facts in Parliament. We are aware of the importance of the cockpit country and the protected area in general for decades, but this is the first time that this has been done. So what has been said there by the JNHC said could hamper. It does not say that it will preclude or exclude the provision of it being recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site. So let us bear that in mind.
All right.
So in other words, all the provisions and steps that will be necessary to ensure that it would qualify for this designation and that the support and assistance would come, as in other locations elsewhere that we have declared as World Heritage Site. The necessary steps must be
But
taken.
those words could hamper, you know, it would concern people.
Yes, of course.
It would concern.
Certainly would.
Let me go here. A cessation order was issued by the National Environment and Planning Agency on March 19, 2019 for mining of bauxite within SML 173. Why was this order issued if no work has begun in the area?
We were guilty of committing a breach. I must accept that and just put that on public record. And we wrote to NEPA and apologized for the breach. We had an ore body which straddled both our existing lease and SML 173. And there was encroachment to the extent of just over an acre into a portion of SML 173. So that is really what happened in regards to that cessation order. We accepted that it occurred, and we ensured that our operations in that area was completely shut down. And we made sure that internally, we put procedures in place to ensure that whenever we have any pits which straddle the two boundaries, straddle the boundary between our existing lease and the new lease, that we do not have any recurrence. And we have not had a recurrence since then. That was an error.
All right, sir. Also, Spring, remember, keep your question tight. We have limited time left and several questions we would like to include. So ask the question, get it out there, and I'll try and get an answer from the people here on the panel for you. Also, Spring. Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Looks like it's frozen.
Yeah, that picture looks frozen. Yeah, let's go to retreat then. Retreat.
Good evening again.
Good evening again.
Let me apologize for doing a second, but I was not satisfied with my first answer, or my first question. I would have listened to Dr. Douglas speaking about the impact of the underwater condition, and I spoke specifically of Yorton, and it affected retreat. See, if you know the distance, that's over driving about an hour and a half. I am not really concerned just about retreat. I am concerned touching somewhere else. Will you destroy Montego Bay because of the underwater condition? You in your non-technical summary, you spoke about exploiting the bauxite use. To me, even that word, I'm not in agreement with it. My Google Map tells me that exploit is to make full use of something, even when it's unfair or underhanded.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Please, you need to answer that.
Yes, thank you,
Madam
Madam Chair.
Question, you know.
And thanks, Mr. Smith, for the question. Again, let me state very, very clearly, or as clearly as I can. Noranda will not be engaged in the production of alumina. Alumina production is an entirely different processing activity from bauxite mining. So when you mention Yorton Works and the alumina plant there, that process of alumina production is what is known as an extractive hydrometallurgical process that involves the use of caustic soda, which you know because that's also sold in hardware. They use it to clean pit and all that and drains and so on, to extract the aluminum values. And therefore, there is always in the past the potential for that to leak into the underground. That's not the case here. And even while that was so in Yorton in the past, and you're talking about the whole money system, which goes back to Santana, which comes back to the dry harbor, we know that. That is no longer the case because there are now practicing a technology which has been developed here, which is known as dry mud stacking. And that facility is now sealed. And the previous mud lake, which they started up in the 1950s, that is abandoned. It is fully rehabilitated. So that does not take place anymore. And you do not have that caustic soda contamination going all the way over to Santana or either over to Trelawney. It just does not happen, Mr. Smith. But the point is well taken. And again, let me stress, you're talking about alumina production, and they have remedied that situation. Now, it does not happen anymore.
So you're not producing, you're saying Noranda is not going into the production of alumina.
No.
You're just mining bauxite.
Only mining bauxite.
All right, let's
and that is very important. And we don't want to make all the rest of the alumina companies culpable either, because they've taken steps to contain those residues.
All right.
And I need to stress this enough because our people need to know, because you'll be surprised to know who don't know these things. And I need to say it. For example, Jamalco, when they started up their alumina plant, was one of the first companies in Jamaica, and they practice it so throughout the world, to have a fully maintained impoundment system of lakes, where this was sealed with layers of clay to make certain that nothing can leak from it, and it is recycled all back into the plant. And if it is not recycled, the economy falls, the competitiveness of the product falls. That's the truth. That's the fact.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm a Retreat resident, and I want the company to introduce inland tilapia into our area, because if there are ponds already established, there could be an extension to people who are not interested in greenhouse farming. They could be involved in the rearing of inland tilapia. Okay, then, Mr. Dell.
I
Okay,
agree.
Mrs. Nelson.
I agree, and I think
That's a freshwater fish, everybody.
Yes, I think the community, we have our PR and community relations persons there, and if that is an area which would address a need.
You need
right?
to take a note of that because there are people who could
I
benefit
think that
from
is maybe not an unreasonable request.
Exactly.
If that's an area which we could get into.
All
and in
right.
fact, in our existing lease, we do have an aquaponics project.
Okay,
right?
the
So this
aquaponics
could
project.
possibly be an extension of such a project.
All right.
But I can't get an undertaking now, right? But that is something surely we can consider looking at.
All right, here from Alps, and that's such a beautiful part of the island. Alps, Barnstaple, Gibraltar, Sawyers, etc., constitutes the largest and best preserved ensemble of indigenous type of architecture in Jamaica. Is Noranda aware that their actions will cause destruction of our heritage?
Madam Chair, we have said so variously, and this is the reason why Noranda in the first place took the initial step in exercising its corporate and social responsibility to engage independently the Jamaica National Heritage Trust to do the historical and archaeological heritage survey.
Let me ask you, Dr. Douglas.
Yes.
There are some beautiful old churches in that area. You're going to chop down, mow down any of them?
I do not think so at all, but that is
You don't think so, or you know that that won't happen?
We said in the presentation, this is very important, that the historical and archaeological heritage resources will be protected. So we said that they will work with the Jamaica National Heritage Trust and work out what must be done in terms of limiting and protecting these resources.
In the picture, you had some grave sites.
Yes,
What will happen to things like grave sites?
There are some grave sites there, and there are other interesting archaeological features, and there are remnants of some archaeological features. Whatever is necessary the action to protect them. I am confident that Noranda will work closely with the Jamaica National Heritage Trust and members of the community to protect these resources.
I have just a question there.
But to continue to do that, as we have done extensively within our existing mining lease. We will not be impacting and operating or destroying any heritage sites.
Thank you very much. I must apologize to those persons whose questions. Just scroll that one up quickly. Let me see what it is saying. If anybody's going to attempt this, you have to do it in 30 seconds. Noranda Bauxite Company over the years have experienced runoff from the mining areas onto both main roads and parochial roads, most of which are poorly built from the onset. What provisions does they have in their lease to prevent any future destruction of such infrastructure? 30 seconds.
Wherever there's an issue, through the community councils and our PR professionals, the engagement which occurs allows us to identify if there's any specific issue, impact from our operations, which is impacting our road or any infrastructure, and our commitment has always been that whenever any such issue is identified, that we address it.
Thank you very much. Well, we've come to the end. I'm so sorry we couldn't take all your questions and comments and interventions, but thank you for joining us this evening for this mixed virtual public meeting. You are being reminded that while the time may not have allowed for all questions to be answered in this meeting, all the questions received have been recorded from all media platforms and will be addressed and included in the verbatim records of this meeting. Further, you are allowed an additional 21 days, whether you're in Gibraltar, Sawyers, or Alps, or in Brixton, overseas, diaspora, right? Then the National Environment and Planning Agency, you get your comments and questions there via electronic mail. And here's the email address, applications@nepa.gov, that is, .jm. That's applications@nepa.gov.jm, or you can send a letter to 10 Caledonia Avenue, Kingston 5. That's 10 Caledonia Avenue, Kingston 5. All questions received will be submitted to the environmental consultant, and responses must be provided by them and submitted to the National Environment and Planning Agency. Now remember that the Environmental Impact Assessment Report and its companion documents, all documents having to do with this project, may be found at the following locations: National Environment and Planning Agency's Documentation Center, that's 11 Caledonia Avenue, Kingston 5. Gibraltar All Age and Infant School over at Gibraltar in St. Anne. Madras Primary School, Madras St. Anne. Discovery Bay Police Station, Discovery Bay in St. Anne. Also Spring Police Station in Trelawney. The Albert Town Post Office in Trelawney. Sawyer's Post Office in Trelawney, and the Stewartstown Police Station, Stewartstown, Trelawney. May I remind you, the NEPA's website at www.nepa.gov.jm, send stuff there. Conrad, you can find your stuff there as well. Conrad Douglas and Associates Limited's website at www.cdaestech.com. Let me do that again for you. It's on the screen, but some of you may not be looking. www.cdaestech.com. Again, we want to thank you for your participation and your time and your interest and your passion on this project. And we wish for you, be safe. Remember, maintain your physical distance. Remember, COVID still a keep. When all is said and done, walk good.